Hello everybody, I'm Logan Crawford and this is the award-winning TV talk show right here on Evru Fresh Outlook. Even more storms are set to sweep into the already drenched Dallas-Fort Worth area. It caps off a week of wild weather for the entire region, and officials are now also keeping a close eye on rising river levels in the south of the state as floodwaters move downstream from the north. At least 19 people dead so far as a result of severe weather in both Texas and Oklahoma. I am joined now by the Fresh Outlook think tank, Dr. Bart Rossi, a political psychologist, Dave Robinson, New Jersey state climatologist from Rutgers University, Tom Lavecchia, a marketing professional of X Factor Selling Systems, and joining us live via Skype, Jean-Ami Desmarais, a senior director of domestic emergencies with Save the Children. She's actually based in one of the affected counties. And Jean-Ami, I will go to you first. Tell us what it's like right now in Texas.
Well, right now on the ground, we're seeing a lot of families whose homes were damaged or destroyed by the storms. This morning, we were in Houston at the apartment complex where about 231 homes were destroyed, and there are now 1,000 new homeless, low-income people living in that area. So it's really heartbreaking as you see the devastation where people have lost everything. But it's also, right now we're on our way into the San Marcos community where, again, thousands of individuals have lost their homes, but you're also seeing hundreds of volunteers come into town to help with the recovery. So it's really a combination of sadness of the loss, but then also renewal and hope as the community starts to dig out from this crisis.
Okay, let's turn to Dave Robinson, our climatologist. The type of destruction that we're seeing from these rainstorms down in Texas are usually associated with named storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, things like that. Rain doesn't seem to bring about disasters like this often. Tell us, what is this phenomenon we're seeing?
Yeah. It's a very stable weather pattern. In other words, nothing was moving for several weeks. While the East Coast has been very dry, all the heavy rain was falling in Texas, Oklahoma, the southern plains. You had energy coming in off the Pacific, perhaps related to the El Nino event that's blossomed in the tropical Pacific Ocean, and it's also pulled in moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, and it's just relentlessly pounded this area. Good news is there's no more drought in that area. It pulled them immediately out of a drought, but both Texas and Oklahoma have had their wettest month, not just their wettest May, but their wettest month of any month going back to the late 19th century this May.
All right. Al Sharpton says these people were smited by God. We won't get into that, but I had to throw it out there. Tell me, is this climate change?
You can't attribute any type of particular weather event to climate change. There's been extremes before, and there will continue to be extremes, but what we think is happening is that it's a more energized atmosphere, an atmosphere that's on steroids, if you will, and you get these triggers, and what was a major event becomes an extremely major event. In other words, we're adding to what would be the normal pattern of extremes that the world has experienced for years. Little extra rain, a little more persistent atmospheric pattern, but this would have occurred without climate change. Just the magnitude of it and the duration of it might have not been as extensive.
Doctor, what are your thoughts about the people on the ground going through such a horrific tragedy at this point? I see those images. I can't believe it. It looks like something out of a disaster movie.
Well, I think a lot of these folks are suffering from post-traumatic stress, as we've said here before with the Nepal incident with the earthquakes, and they're hyper-vigilant, they're very concerned about their well-being, they're fearful, and it's hard to overcome that, especially in the short run, very difficult. But to the point that David made, I think that the psychology of this is all about really being prepared, or be prepared, as Boy Scouts say. But what happens is we're really not prepared because we don't want to deal with climate. We don't want to look at the whole situation of climate change, even though this might not be necessarily climate change. It's at least indirectly related in some ways. And I think we should start thinking about how we prepare ourselves and not be reactive, not just be a reactive group to a tragedy.
Exactly. And Governor Cuomo of New York State actually accurately said, I feel, that it seems like we're dealing with the storm of the century every 6 months. So something might have changed The debate on that will continue. Part of the process, Tom, will be rebuilding. You worked on Hurricane Sandy relief. What type of programs do you think will be needed to be put into place?
Yeah, very similar to Sandy. Because for my firm, we had multiple clients that were affected by Sandy. Businesses just wiped out. So first, you want to look for any state and federal funding that are immediately available. Probably FEMA will get involved. Now, here's a tricky part. If you expect to get all your funding to replace your business from federal, state, or even local charities, it's just not going to happen. So be prepared to get some help from them, especially some short-term help. But you're going to probably have to go to your primary insurance provider to find out, hey, what they cover and what they don't. A lot of times, there's a lot of fine print that doesn't cover a lot of stuff. Then at that point, you have to hit your savings. That's why they say save for a rainy day, not to mention friends and family. So at this point, what I recommend is get a home base. And the sad part here is when you affect a city like that, right? I mean, any area that's affected would be bad. But in a city, you generally work, have your business in one area, and live fairly close, right? That's where you're in the city. So a lot of times, both your home and your business is wiped out. But from a business standpoint, what I recommend is try to get a home base. It could be rent a small office, visit a friend's office, a library. Get a home base that you can go to every day, organize your day. Because I'm assuming psychologically, you're going to probably want to get away from your affected business. You may not even be allowed to go there. Get a home base, start rebuilding, get some funds back in. And if you're in a contact business, call your big clients, let them know you're okay, and that you'll be open for business shortly.
Sounds great. Let's turn to Jean-Ami again. One of the things that struck me, Jean-Ami, is the tragic stories that we hear coming out of this. We hear 19 deaths, but one of them was put a very real face upon the situation, and that is the homecoming queen who was driving 35 miles home from the prom, and she was killed in a flash flood. Tell me some of the stories you've heard of personal suffering on the ground there in Texas.
Well, I think always children are the most vulnerable in any disaster. And so you hear the stories of parents who had to carry their children through the floodwater. Actually, I think of relevance to your audience in New Jersey, we heard so many stories even after Sandy of parents who woke up in the middle of the night who realized their house already had floodwater in it and who had to carry their children through the floodwater in the middle of the night to safety. It's the same type of stories here. In Houston, in addition to the flooding, there was a tornado that struck on Monday in the middle of some of the severe weather, and it hit in the early hours of the morning. So children were still sleeping in these homes as the roof was torn off, and really the buildings imploded around them. So I know the gentleman before was talking about some of particularly the mental health issues. On a good day in the U.S., there are not enough mental health services, but after a disaster, there's so much that needs to be done to immediately support children's emotional recovery needs. And we're seeing the same thing here. There's a new realm of storms that are coming into the area today. It's palpable. The children and families are very aware that more weather is coming. And so there's an elevated level of fear among the community. Will they be affected? Will their communities flood again? So again, Save the Children knows there are things that you can do as parents, even children in New Jersey now who are watching some of these images. It will be very frightening for them. So it's important that you listen to your children clearly, that you answer their questions. They don't need the full-blown news version of what's happened, but reassuring them that they will be safe while they are there with you. And then also helping your family to create a plan and to talk about if another disaster happens, whether it's a storm like Sandy comes through the New York area again, or if it's a flash flood or affecting communities here. If you have a plan as a family, there's a lot less feeling of panic at the moment that disaster happens.
All right, Dr. Bart, I guess you echo everything that Jean-Ami just said there.
Yes, and when it comes to kids, I think it's real important to remember that the kids respond to concrete suggestions. They're not global, they're not big picture people, they're kids. And I think if parents can focus on the fact that, this does happen in life, it's not going to happen again, try to reassure them, use analogies like driving a car, there might be an accident, but we're most likely not going to have that accident, and deal in concrete terms to help kids. It goes a long ways in the short run.
Absolutely. Dave, I don't think people realize the devastating effect of floods. From my meteorological studies, which were short-lived as we discussed, it's the most dangerous natural phenomenon, correct?
Absolutely. In a hurricane, more people are killed by a storm surge or by river flooding than by the wind. The water carries out an awfully strong punch. You may have seen videos and all, turn around and don't, so you won't drown, is the National Weather Service's credo, because you only need a foot of water to elevate a car and start sweeping it away. Wow. So in so many different ways, water is the most dangerous factor out there in a storm.
And if you are caught up in a flash flood and you're in your car and your car is submerged, it's impossible to get the windows open unless you equalize the pressure, correct? Tell us a little bit about surviving in a situation like that.
Well, that's awfully difficult. I know some people keep devices in their car so they can break a window, cut a seatbelt, or break a window if they get in such a predicament. There's not a heck of a lot you can do in that case, except perhaps get your car wedged in someplace where you're fortunate. The best thing to do there, of course, is to just avoid it. I know it sounds trite, but you should just avoid it. Turn around, don't drown.
Turn around, don't drown, great advice. And that's what struck me about the prom queen driving home. Why were those young people allowed to drive home on a night like that, where these people are driving 35, 45, 50 miles?
I have no idea, and it could have been a localized nature of the storms, driving on a road they weren't aware of, a road that was washed out, or just simply bad judgment on multiple people's
and
parts.
And that poor young girl who died was able to call her father, was able to call the police, and they saw the car, they couldn't get to her. Tom, talk to us a little bit about rebuilding and your advice to the homeowners out there and the businesses out there that are trying to look forward to tomorrow when all of this ends and they need to pick up the pieces.
Yeah. So aside for obviously the psychological and physical damage, the reason why floods are so tough, whether you're a homeowner or a business owner, it's the number one calamity, if you will, that's not insured.
Exactly. You need special flood insurance if you live in a flood zone.
Correct. So what happens is either you may be denied insurance, or if you can get it, a lot of people run the numbers. They say, wow, it's $3,000 per year. Nothing ever happened. God forbid something happens. I'll have $30,000, in damage. If I'm in for 10 years, I'm in the clear, and I kept the money. That's how some people think, right? They rationalize it. But more than likely, they probably don't have it for that reason, because they rationalize it and then they get screwed, to be honest. Right. So how to rebuild is, again, build a base, get your finances in order. Because what happens is your business is crushed, right? But you have, let's say, accounts receivable. Number one, collect those quickly. Right. People just kind of shut down, and somebody owes them money, call them up respectfully to say, I'm still in business. Right. I'm still owed this invoice. Right. Is it possible to pay maybe sooner or on time so you can get your finances in order? Because if accounts receivable are in order, you at least know you have some money coming in, and that begins the rebuilding process. You can't rely on the insurance companies because they may take a while to assess. And federal and state governments programs are great, but they're not always timely. Get your account receivables in. Hopefully, you have some money in the bank. Start rebuilding right away, and be honest about your business. If things weren't maybe going so great in that particular area, think about it. It might be a time to get a new location, new business strategy. Maybe take your business from brick and mortar to online. So it's also a good time to take a gut check on your business and see where you're at, because it may help you change your strategy moving forward.
Sounds great. Let's talk to Jean-Ami. What is your assessment, Jean-Ami, about the response on the ground to the tragedy there in Texas?
Well, the state of Texas has a very strong capacity to respond. They have a lot of experience responding, and they've done a very good job mobilizing. They also, they've done a great job with weather warnings. Even today, there's a lot of information out there. People need to heed the warnings. The same is true anywhere in the U.S. There's now very good alerts, often particularly for weather events. They know which hours it's going to hit. They make recommendations. So again, as the gentleman was saying before, tragically, sometimes people don't listen, and they don't take that guidance and avoid. There's an awful lot that can be done to help avoid a predicament before it happens. But overall, the response here in Texas has been strong, and there's a lot of help available for people across the state.
All right, Jean-Ami Desmarais, I want to thank you for joining us with Save the Children. Appreciate you getting into the car and talking to us on the ground about the situation there in Texas. Dave, I'm going to give you the final word. What's the takeaway from all this?
Takeaway is, as was said earlier, you need to be prepared. It's awfully difficult when you're seeing something that's unprecedented to get a handle on it, be it these floods in Texas or Sandy. But you have to think outside the box sometimes.
How do we prepare ourselves, though?
Well, there's different ways of doing it. As a family, as a community, and as a state or region, there are different steps you can take.
So as a family, have water in the house, have food in the house, have an evacuation plan, have a place to meet.
Exactly. And the community has to have effective emergency management services that communicate between police, fire, rescue crews, and such. And on a larger level, there has to be connection between the state and utilities and other entities to make sure that they're on the ground before the storm, hopefully, during, and importantly, afterwards as well.
Are we getting better at this after Katrina?
We are learning our lessons back to Andrew, Katrina, Sandy, these floods, but there seems to always be more to learn.
Okay. Dave Robinson from Rutgers University, climatologist from the state of New Jersey, thanks so much for your time. The rest of the EBRU think tank will be back talking about more on many other topics, including this one, the proposed merger of two telecom giants, what the move could mean for you after this.